Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, George Plaster of Nashville Sports Radio. This episode sponsored by the Well Coffee House, which is a Nashville area coffee house that provides fresh roast coffee along with house-made pastries, breakfast, and lunch offerings. There are 4 locations to serve you in the Nashville area. Those are Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, and Bellevue. You can get more info at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We thank our co-presenting sponsor, WellSpire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Today's news sponsored by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If your loved one has been hurt in an accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Vanderbilt beat South Carolina in men's basketball 83-72. The Commodores wrap up the regular season in the SEC at 3-15 and will play Arkansas in the SEC tournament on Wednesday. In baseball, the Commodores lose to UCLA and USC out on the road and then beat TCU in a third game out in L.A. So Vanderbilt heads back home to play Toledo on Tuesday and then will face Kentucky this weekend to open SEC play. Our guest line brought to you by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. Had no clue how comfortable Boll & Branch sheets were until I got them. They are fair trade certified, meaning they are made under safe conditions by men and women treated and paid fairly. Try them free for a month. You can return them, but you won't want to. Once you get these sheets, try the mattress. That was voted the best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy and get $50 off your first set of sheets. George Plaster of Nashville Sports Radio joins me. George, hope you had a great weekend. Baseball is upon us, and thank you for being with us today.
Well, the fact that baseball is upon us almost guarantees that it's a good week. I'm waiting to see the weather kind of break, and it's getting close, and I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, I mowed the yard in 65-degree weather yesterday, which is always one of the first encouraging signs.
I did yard work, which I don't want anybody to faint, but that's pretty good for me.
Well, maybe a few people fainted when Vanderbilt got its second basketball win in a row. I guess those would have been some people on the South Carolina side because the Gamecocks' chances to get in the NCAA tournament took a huge hit. I don't know what to expect anymore, but I don't think I was expecting 2 wins in a row to end the SEC season against at least NIT caliber teams. So finally, there's a little bit of good momentum for the basketball program, it would appear.
You've got to give them a lot of credit for the fact that they have not pitched in the towel. And you don't know when that pays off necessarily. I mean, obviously it did Saturday, but in the long term, you want to believe that there's some character there. It would be so easy, especially coming off whatever it was a year ago, 0-19, 0-20, for, when it got to 1-13 this year, for some of them to say, what's the point? What's the use? And they haven't done that. And you have to give them some credit for that.
I thought the biggest part of the game, and I don't know how much people paid attention to this, there was a 4-minute and 22-second stretch where Saban Lee was out of the game. It was about a third of the way into the second half, I guess is a good way to put it. Saban had just picked up a second and third foul. The third was a technical. And Vanderbilt sits him down. It has a 6-point lead when it takes him out. It has a 6-point lead when it brings him back in. I think that might have been the key to the game, was for the Commodores to keep the score even without the guy who is far and away their best player on the bench. And frankly, not a lot of support. I mean, you got Pippen, Dessou was having a good game, Evans was having a good game, but those aren't things that you normally count on. To be able to do that with him on the bench, I thought was impressive.
It really is. And it also says that as the season has gone on, that they have adapted to the issues that they've, the hand that they've been dealt. I doubt early in the year that they could have handled losing anything, and then they're forced to lose Aaron Nesmith, And you do wonder what this team would have been with him. To have gotten 3 SEC wins without him, and to, really show some steam at the end, pretty impressive. You have to give them credit for, continuing to fight, continuing to deal with the obstacles, and really with a minimum of whining and all that kind of stuff. You have to give them some kudos there.
Their last 2 games in SEC play last year, March the 6th, there was that 84-48 loss to Arkansas that probably did Bryce Drew in. And then March the 9th, they go to LSU. They lose that 180-59. Then, of course, they bow out in the SEC tournament to Texas A&M. That 169-52 in a game that was just kind of ugly. Very big contrast to how they're finishing this season and how they finished last.
Yeah, I think first of all, I can remember vividly in the Texas A&M game, they couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Shooting was absolutely horrendous in that game. And you just never saw the zip that you're seeing right now, and good for them. Again, I give them a lot of credit for that.
Let's do a what if here, okay? First of all, a backcourt of Nesmith, Pippen, and Saban Lee is pretty good for just about any level. Now, may not pass at Kansas or Kentucky or somewhere like that, but for most teams, you take that. So that would have been a pretty good threesome to build around. I think Lee has responded better than we knew. Pippen's been a better player than we knew. But let's throw in another what if. Let's say that they get Yanni Wetzell into grad school and they keep Nesmith healthy. This could have been a more interesting season than I think any of us would have imagined.
Oh, yeah. And the question is, to what level would it have been? And I'm not sure any of us really know the answer. But I see what Yanni Wetzell has done for San Diego State. Not only has he been a really solid player, but he's been kind of their emotional leader, which I didn't know he had. Frankly, I didn't know a lot of things about Yanni Wetzell that have sort of been exposed at San Diego State. The guy's a really good player, and he could have helped them tremendously if he had played to that level here. Who knows?
Yeah, Cleavon Brown's another what if in there too. Now, I think that, look, they did benefit. The SEC was nowhere near what any of us thought it would be this year, and I think that's worth mentioning too, is part of the opportunity comes into play because the other 13 teams aren't what we thought they would have been.
No, I think the league maybe has to go back to the drawing board a little bit about basketball, because right now I think the projections are that they'll get 3, and if there's a 4th, then it's somebody that has to make some real noise in the tournament here in Nashville. That's very disappointing.
Yeah, I'm looking at Ken Palm right now, which is different than net, but it's pretty accurate in terms of sorting teams. You got Kentucky at 28 overall. I never remember the SEC having a conference winner that didn't finish in the top 25 of a major computer ranking like that. So that's probably a first. Auburn at 34, LSU at 36, Florida at 33. Right now, that's your 4. Mississippi State has got a chance this week with how it plays. Other than that, it's just hard to see anything. Maybe Arkansas, but Arkansas went 7-11 in the regular season. I think barring maybe a run to the title game or winning it all, that's just hard to see. It's hard to imagine how it went as badly as it did, because I still look around. I think there's too much talent for the league to be this bad.
Well, it's been a very inconsistent league, and nothing exemplifies that more than Tennessee's performance Saturday against Auburn. I was really starting to buy into Tennessee. I saw some things in the Florida game, especially on the defensive end a week ago, and I was like, wow, this is impressive. Then they go to Kentucky, erase a 16-point deficit, and then lay a total stink bomb against Auburn. And unfortunately, if you look around at 4 or 5 of the teams in the league, that's sort of been the the way it's gone. Florida, I can't figure Florida out. I guess I still believe Mississippi State is the best of this group, but they don't prove that on a night in, night out basis. So I don't know. The tournament sure looks like if there's going to be a 4th team that gets in, that somebody's going to have to emerge out of the rubble here at the tournament, make a deep run, or perhaps win the whole thing.
Yeah, net rankings as of today: Kentucky 21, Auburn 27, Florida 28, LSU 29. The next team is Arkansas at 47, but I don't think Arkansas is going to get in, barring a miracle. And then Mississippi State at 50. After that, you look at Tennessee at 63, South Carolina at 67. So I think those teams on the outside looking in, unless you get maybe multiple victories over those 4 that are going to be in the tournament. Otherwise, I think they're looking at the NIT. Georgia switched to baseball. A weird weekend for Vandy. They fall 3-2 to UCLA, then 2-1 to Southern Cal, both those true road games, and then get a walk-off walk. Carter Young at the plate with a 3-1 count and nobody out in the Sunday TCU game, which was played, I think, at Southern Cal's field. And the Commodores get a walk to win that one. 1 out of 3, not what you wanted, but more importantly, boy, some injury storylines coming out of the weekend. You got Austin Martin out with the hamstring injury. Kumar Rocker, don't know what his status is. I've asked. They're kind of tight-lipped on that. But he comes out in the 4th inning after walking, I believe, 4 and hitting 2 and losing that game. Just didn't have command of his stuff at all. And then you've got Mason Hickman, who didn't throw. That's 3 first-team preseason All-Americans with some pretty solid questions around their health right now.
Yeah, they've got their backs against the wall right now. Suddenly all the sugar plums of winning the national title a year ago, you got to throw those out for right now because they're not quite that team. Now, that said, what you do in March, while it's important, it's a lot more important what you do in May and June when you're a team and a program of the kind of status that Tim Corbin has put together. I will say this, I've got all the confidence in the world. If anybody is going to figure it out, it's Tim. And he will get a lot of this straightened out. I guess let me put it this way. He'll get straightened out what medically can't be straightened out. Did I say that right?
I think I know what you meant, whether you said it right or not. But I mean, look.
Yeah.
At this point, I think they're playing fine. But you look at the circumstances. I mean, you got 3 of your best players hobbled. You got really a lineup of a bunch of freshmen and a couple of sophomores who didn't play much last year because they were behind other people. That's a pretty good series to go in. I mean, they score 1 fewer run than their opponents do, and of course they can't catch the breaks. They lose the 1-run games. I mean, it's really a weird place for them to be right now because they got a lot of deficiencies, but you get those guys healthy, and the season, I think, potentially takes a pretty big turn from there if you get all 3 of those kids back.
Well, obviously, Rocker, I mean, you start with that. That's a big key because they've had the luxury of knowing that they've got a real ace, somebody you can trot out there against virtually anybody and know that you're going to be in it till the end. So whatever status he is right now, they've got to figure that one out as soon as possible because all of a sudden that shifts a lot of people's roles. And the question is, with Hickman in his situation, what do you do if Rocker, isn't available, isn't ready, isn't whatever? I mean, you see what the problems are there.
Well, the weird thing is that their freshman pitched really well again. Schultz threw, I think, about 5 innings of scoreless relief against TCU. I guess four is more like it. I didn't see the exact number, but he comes in for Leiter, I think, in the fifth, and leaves for Brown. I guess Brown only threw the eighth because they didn't bat or didn't throw, or yeah, I guess they did throw in the ninth. I'm rambling here. But anyway, a long relief outing, let's put it that way. Schultz threw really well. Leboke was great against UCLA, and I think 5 innings of relief. So they're at least getting some pick-me-up from freshmen. We knew that Leiter was going to be at the forefront of people's attention, and people thought he was a real deal. He's pitched really well, but now you're getting some of these freshmen that you didn't know how they'd throw are really lighting it up and producing for them in big spots right now.
Yeah, which is a great sign on that front. But you're right. You need Rocker, you need Hickman, and hopefully they can get all that straightened out because SEC play is starting, and that's the big boy league. Kindergarten is over, and we're now into high school.
Yeah, and with that, let's go to the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood, who can take care of all your insurance needs. Call Josh today, 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him at Joshua Minton HQ on Twitter or at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it here. Mr. Vandy says, what are your impressions of Coach Stackhouse as he gets ready to close his first season, and do you think he'll stay around long?
Those are good questions. I think the highest marks have to be for the fact that he got this team to continue to play hard to the very end. That has to be worth something. And it has to doubly be worth something based on what they were a year ago. I can't think of many schools that have had to deal with this kind of prolonged agony. Oh, for whatever a year ago, whatever it was this year in the SEC. For those kids to fight to the end, he has to receive the highest marks on that front. Coaching wise, there's a lot there, to seem to like. It now becomes a question of what level can this staff recruit at, and what kind of alignment do they have a year from now? I mean, I would assume with a straight face, there's no way Candace Lee can allow Jerry Stackhouse to have a 13-person staff, not after all of the yapping about Malcolm Turner's spending. And the other thing is, and I don't have anything to base this on, but, virtually every year, kids at some point start saying, I'm not sure I want to be here, blah, blah, blah. Season ends and they either change their minds or they go. So who knows?
Yeah, the transfer thing is the main thing I'll be watching once the season was over, because there was starting to be some buzz about that. And look, it's hard to separate what's fact and fiction. I think you hear that at a lot of schools as it gets late in the season, no matter what the situation is. Now, when you're losing as much as they are, I don't think that helps. I think it will be interesting to see how winning two like that at the end, and who knows, maybe they pick one up or two in Nashville this week, how much that changes things. But I go back to probably the most impressive thing about him so far. They lose Nesmith, who's the focus of his team, and at that point you're left with a freshman point guard in Scottie Pippen and kind of a combo guard in Saban Lee, where the kid has never really had, I guess, a consistent defined role. He's had to be point guard at times, where I don't know if that's exactly what he is. He's had to be sort of a two guard at times, where he's a kid who's not an outstanding three-point shooter. So there's always been some kind of question about where he fits. I think the thing that I give Jerry the most credit for is building his offense around those two guards, where they get to the foul line a lot and make a lot of stuff happen. And look, there just really was no margin for error. When you get a Dessou and an Evans and guys like that who hit some shots, then they could pull an upset like they have pulled on Saturday. But I give Stackhouse credit for being able to build around those two guards finding something that worked that gave them space to operate, because those two were really what carried them in their last couple of games.
Yeah, I mean, you've hit kind of the nail on the head as to what they are and what they have been. One of the real wild cards in it is Maxwell Evans, who can shoot you in to scenarios that maybe you're not good enough to be in, like he did against LSU. And then there are also times with him where he can't hit the broadside of the barn and he becomes a liability. That's one of the people, it seems to me, that, you'd like to see get into a consistent pattern. He can really help that team when he shoots.
Wonders asks, what are your personal top 3 Memorial Magic moments that you remember?
Ooh, wow, that's a hell of a question. And I'm going way, way back for some of this. The F Troop, the Butch Fear, Fosness, the late Joe Ford, when they clinched the SEC title against Kentucky. I was in high school at the time, and they were so much the definition of team. That team, they were so easy to root for because they shared the basketball. I mean, they were all the things that we don't see enough of in college basketball these days. Gosh, running through. I tell you what, go to another question and give me just a little bit of time to think that one through, because I want to come with something halfway educated.
Yeah, I've got 3 that I'll circle back to once we get back to that question. The last question I'll go to now, and then we'll come back. VU Peary says, what kind of memorial renovation would you like to see, especially taking a balcony and the crow's nest and making large executive suites or club level area?
Well, first of all, I guess for me, I'll just go with a little bit of philosophy. I think Memorial Gym, when it's right, is one of the coolest venues in the country. And I think what I would like to see is for some renovations that don't destroy the magic. It's a real shame that there's a lot of thought of downsizing Memorial Gym, because I don't buy it. Nashville is a great basketball city, and if this school could get back to a championship level, I have no doubt that they'd put 15,000 in there a night. I say that the students are certainly different. They don't seem to care. And I guess I don't know why they should. Most of them aren't from here. Most of them aren't anywhere close to here. But gosh, that's one of the things that program needs, is somebody to unify the students, to get them on board, because they can be such a huge help. And in the old days, they used to turn out in numbers that, right now seem unimaginable. Air conditioning Memorial Gym isn't obvious that people like me who've been in there for a long time see. It's amazing to get a 5-degree day. That place right now can be oppressive. And that's one thing I would like to see happen.
Yeah, the students, I thought, showed up in decent numbers to start the year. And then, of course, the losing happened and student attendance dissipates, which is entirely predictable. It just kind of goes back to a sort of a theme in general, is that the student body has changed so much over the last 20 years, where so many kids aren't from near here or not even from America. You get a lot of kids from China and places like that. I just think that the demographics in the student body have really changed a lot of things, not just in terms of basketball attendance, but in terms of, I think, alumni involvement and the things that a lot of those kids care about too.
Well, I think that goes to one of the important things uh, that this particular coaching staff and frankly the one before it didn't get at all, which is if you're going to have a 13-member staff, then one of them's got to be assigned to have that job, to create an environment that the students want to be a part of. Now, in the end, that falls on Jerry Stackhouse, and if he's not willing to buy in and be a part of a couple of events that involve the students to try and get them revved up, then screw it. He deserves what he gets. But to me, that needs to be kind of a priority in the future, is that somebody on that staff, in particular, if they're going to have a 13-person staff, somebody needs to be assigned to really go after the students, spend a little money, do a few creative things, and try to get them involved.
Okay, back to your Memorial Magic question, your best three.
You know, one of them might be the night they beat North Carolina when C.M. Newton was here. That was a great non-conference win. Carolina at the time was one of the real behemoths. I also remember when Eddie Fogler's group beat Shaquille O'Neal, and that certainly might be one that Willie could talk to you about. I think he was on that team. I think he got some minutes in that game. The whole Elder, Anglin, Billy McCaffrey year that they were so good in '93, that gym was on fire. It absolutely was. And I would say, Shane Foster's night, senior night against Mississippi State, but I would also throw in when Billy Gillespie was the coach at Kentucky, and Kevin and his group took Kentucky behind the woodshed and beat them here by about 40. And, that's some pretty cool stuff right there.
Yeah, my three that I was at, and I'll throw this out there first. I was not at the Shane Foster game. I was on my honeymoon, so I was not there for that one.
Legit excuse.
Yeah, I also had the flu, which was great timing to get the flu on your honeymoon. After the resort you were supposed to be at was closed for the flu, by the way. So that was a double whammy. My three were when Barry Goheen hit the shot to beat Louisville. And I believe it was the spring or the winter of 88, December of 88 or so. I think that's the loudest.
I remember it.
I think that's the loudest environment I've ever been in. Basketball game, any sporting event, rock concert, you name it. I think that's the loudest I've ever heard a building. The North Carolina game in 87, whatever it was, when Will Purdue was there, I think would be on that list.
December of 87.
Yeah, and I remember this wasn't a great game because Vanderbilt pulled away, but the Kentucky game in 93, Fogler's last year, where Vandy and Kentucky tied for the SEC regular season championship. I believe Vanderbilt wins that by like 17, hits some foul shots to pull away. Billy McCaffrey went for like 30 and 10 assists or something like that. And that just was when that team was really clicking, and that Kentucky rivalry was huge and it was just so much fun. Those are the three, without giving us any thought other than answering the questions that comes to us, that stick out most to me.
Yeah, without having the media guide in front of us to try and jog our memory, those are some pretty good ones. I'll tell you, if you've got a minute, a couple of stuff on Goheen. I can remember when Barry was when he came here, and I can remember asking a couple of his teammates early on, tell me about him, and they weren't all that impressed. When you'd watch him you didn't see some of what was coming. Now, apparently, C.M. Newton did, and we all had a good laugh about it later because Goheen's career, came down to all these just improbable, unbelievable buzzer beaters. All of that started in Philadelphia at the Palestra. Vandy beat Penn at the buzzer. He hit a shot at the buzzer, and I remember being sick as a dog, and flying home the next day. God, I was hurting, but that was where all of that started. And Goheen had 5 or 6 of those kind of moments. Louisville being one of them. Georgia with a step back 3 at the buzzer. The thing in the NCAA tournament. I'm missing a couple of them, but there is one he didn't make, and I was courtside for it because I guess I was involved in the broadcast at the time. But at Alabama, it comes down to about a 45-footer at the buzzer. And I'm telling you, from where I was sitting, it looked dead on. And it missed by an eyelash. It was the only one of these he ever missed. And I remember asking him later, I said, from my vantage point, it looked good. What did you think? And he said, it looked good to me too. I thought it was going in. An amazing athlete. And and yet I'm laughing because I remember a Super Bowl, the Bears New England Super Bowl, where the Fridge scored a touchdown, and the game got so boring. There were a bunch of us that ended up in we did some sports trivia thing. Goheen's recollection is that he wiped me out. Mine is that I kicked his butt. And here we are 35 years later, and he and I are still arguing over that.
Goheen had, from what I remember, I think it was 7 or 8 buzzer beaters, more or less, or shots that were close enough to the buzzer that basically won the game or tied it. You got Louisville, you got Penn, you got the Georgia game, you got the Pitt game in the NCAA tournament. I think he knocked off Tennessee with a series of shots and layups and things. I want to say his freshman year, and then there's a few others I just can't remember that I think were in there too.
What I remember about the Pittsburgh one, I had gone to Memphis State at that point, and we had been eliminated the day before up at Notre Dame by, at the time, the number 1 team in the country, Purdue. And so we had flown home from Notre Dame, and I was over at a good friend of mine, John Albright, who played at Memphis State. And we're watching this whole thing develop. And at one point, I turned to John and I was like, there's nothing new about this. I said, this kid has been doing this from the minute he stepped foot on that campus. And one of the things I remember on Barry is that Barry was not a guy that wanted to spend a lot of time in a weight room. And that frustrated them a little bit. When basketball season was over, he wanted to get the hell away from it. And he knew how to handle that better than anybody. I think for a while the coaches weren't sure quite what they were getting, but after a while, I think it just became whatever he wants to do.
Yeah, I'd say that worked out pretty well.
He was an amazing guy. And, all these years later, Barry has written a book about his experiences at Vanderbilt. And the book is really good. It came out, I don't know, 6-9 months ago. And he got me a copy of it. And, a lot of it is, C.M. Newton and stuff that I value so much. In fact, hold on a second. The name of the book is Buzzer Beaters and Memorial Magic, a memoir of the Vanderbilt Commodores 87 to 89, written by Barry Goheen. And the book is really good. And I called Barry after I finished reading it, and I said, hey, this thing was really well done. Congratulations, man, I enjoyed it. Well, then what happened was we got into conversation about things going on during that time. And, I had an interesting perspective because I was 25, 26 years old. I wasn't all that much older than the players, but I knew a lot of things because I was traveling with the team and part of the radio broadcast. And Barry ended up saying, he said, I wish I'd called you before I wrote this. And I was like, yeah, I might have been able to fill in some gaps for you.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I've been meaning to have Barry on the podcast at some point. I think I will make a point to do that sometime this spring or summer.
Well, he's first of all, a terrific attorney down in the Atlanta area. One of his drawbacks is he's a Cardinals fan, and so he and I go at it a lot. He's gotten more of the upper hand in that battle than I have, certainly last year. But what an amazing athlete he was.
Yeah, those were the fun times to watch, and hopefully at some point it gets back to that again.
Well, I can tell you this, 30 some odd years later, we all get together a couple, 3 times a year. Will Perdue is sort of the lightning rod around that. And we're getting together again this Saturday for another one of those little deals. And it's always fun to relive a lot of it. There are a lot of lies that go into that. Some of them are aimed at me, and I'm shocked by that.
George, appreciate you joining us today. Tell people about your show. Tell people where they can find you on Twitter.
Chris, first of all, I do have a Twitter account, George Plaster TN, and I'm on WNSR, which is 560 on the AM dial, 95.9 on FM. If you have trouble with the signal, go to the app. It's Nashville Sports Radio, and you can hear us anywhere from, let's make up a couple of places, Tupelo to Istanbul. It comes in clear as a bell. You know what, though? You, Chris, you almost have stopped me from a great story that Goheen was involved in and Will Perdue.
No, let's have it.
Okay, so this has been probably 6-7 years ago. And if memory serves me correctly, Will was sort of the catalyst of this thing. He sort of, if I remember correctly, kind of set up a reunion of a bunch of CM's players here. And so the whole festivities were going to end because it was basically, if I remember correctly, done really without the athletic department. And so it was going to end after whatever game with a dinner that night at Fleming's. We had a private room and there were a bunch of players there, and Coach Newton gets up and somewhere, during this dinner, he says, this is really a neat deal for me. He said, I look around the room and he said, we have doctors, we have lawyers. And then he takes this long pause, and I knew he was going to do this to me. And he goes, hell, even George turned out okay. And then he takes this shot at me. He says, well, he says, I'm amazed you're here, given that your hockey team is playing
tonight. When was this?
Oh, man. I miss Coach Newton a lot.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do. Those were just some great times. The 80s and 90s just have meant so much to so many people. It's a shame to see how far the program has fallen from where it was, because if you weren't there and you didn't live it, it's hard to imagine what it was.
Bingo. Sorry to take you a little farther than you wanted, but that thought crept through my mind, and I knew when he took that long pause, he was going to take a little rip at me.
Yeah, you guys had a great relationship. He was a great man, and again, hopefully one day we will see the return of some of what you and I both lived through.
Amen. Let's do it.
George, thanks for joining us, and I will catch you on your show, I guess, sometime Tuesday afternoon as usual.
Put it right now under TBA.
Okay, I'm used to TBA.
To be announced, whatever that means.
Yeah, that's like starting pitching these days for Vanderbilt. A lot of TBAs this weekend, and we'll see how many TBAs are coming up next when they play Kentucky. And I guess we'll have an SEC series in the book next time you and I talk.
Bring it on. Let's do it.
He's George Plaster. I'm Chris Lee, host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. We appreciate you listening, and we'll have more episodes coming your way later this week.